I'm making view C from New Look 6449. It's a button down denim shirt. It's got rolled up sleeves. You can make it with a grandad collar, which is just with the collar stand, or you can make it with a full collar. It's got a button band, collar and a belt. And I'm going to show you how to make the cuffs with a button and a placket. When making a sleeve, there are quite a few things to transfer from your pattern pieces. So there's the cuff. You cut 4 of those, 2 of them are interfaced, and you mark your buttonhole and any little markings. There's notched edge and a non-notched edge. At the bottom of the sleeve, there are pleats. You often get those at the cuff part where it joins on. And today we're going to show you how to make a continuous lap. So that's how to finish off that little placket on a cuff. I've made this pattern before and I found that it's a little bit short for me. So I've cut along the length and shorten line and lengthened the sleeve by the amount I want, because when you're making a cuffed shirt, you can't just add an extra bit on the bottom, because you will lose the scale of this part of the sleeve fitting into the cuff. This is what you're aiming for. So you're aiming for that continuous lap placket, and you've got some pleats there that give you movement in your arm and movement to open your cuff. There's a row of easing stitches on the top, and they allow the fabric just to curve round. You don't want it gathered unless it's a gathered sleeve pattern, but you just want that to curve over. When you make a sleeve with a cuff, you cannot put the sleeve in flat. You have to make the sleeve up by matching the side notches and sewing down the side of your sleeve. And then you put the cuff on, and then you will need to put the sleeve head into the shirt in a circle so that you set it into the sleeve. So how do we do all of these little components that make up a sleeve button cuff? This is the cuff that I'm aiming for. So it's got the continuous lap placket and the cuff with pleats. As you can see, I'm a little bit short on the arms, which is why I've added on the lengthen and shorten line here. First thing to do is to transfer all of the markings. So I've used some tailor's tacks here, and I've used chalks to mark the pleats here. So now I can remove the paper pieces and draw on the position of the placket. So I'm going to go from the wide end to the point, and the same on the other side. And that's going to be my stitch line. So I'm going to sew along that stitch line with 1 stitch across the point at the end, and that will allow me to snip into that point without cutting into the stitch line and getting a little pucker at the end of my placket. So at the end of my placket, I'll be able to stitch up to the 1 stitch that I'm going to put across, and then we can work on the pleats in a moment. So let's sew this and slash the placket, and then I can show you how to add the continuous lap. I'm going to cut up to the tip, halfway between the stitch line that I've just made, all the way up to the top. And now I can take the tailor's tacks out because I don't need those, and we can prepare the continuous lap piece. So along one edge of the continuous lap, which is like a little flat tab, we're going to iron down 6mm, and we've transferred the markings to the tab, got little tailor's tacks on the end, so I'm going to press that to the wrong side 6mm. I'm going to put a little bit of fray stop just at the very tip of where I've snipped, just while I'm working, because I'm going to be sewing close to there and stretching the slash out. Okay, so I'm going to hold the slash now horizontal, and with right sides together, the continuous lap, right side together, I'm going to sew across the end. The fold that I've just made, the iron-on fold, is at the bottom. That's not the end I'm sewing. And I'm going to keep a 6mm seam allowance. I'm going to sort of grade in a little bit towards the slash tip and then grade back out again. It's a little bit tricky because you're trying not to get any pinches or puckers in the end. So a few pins is helpful. Too many becomes a bit of a hindrance, so you put a couple of pins in to guide it, and it's better to sew it with the shirt sleeve showing, not the lap showing, because then you can make sure that you don't get too many of these ripples at the end. So by holding it out horizontally, I've sewn across the end all the way to the other end, and I've tried not to get a pucker on this end, and you'll know because when you turn it over you should get to fold your placket in half. That'll need pressing, so you're going to press that out with the seam allowance going towards the fold, and then we're going to fold the lap over and top stitch in place. To complete the placket, I'm going to fold over the pressed edge and match that up with the stitching. And the folded edge, the one that goes on top, is from the outer sleeve, and the one where you can see the lap is next to the pleats, so you get it the right way round. So we're going to top stitch that in place, and just take your time with that because that's the finished look of your placket. Final stage is to sew across the end to hold that down, that fold down into a position. Some patterns show a straight bit going along, some show one at 45 degrees. So follow your pattern there for whichever your shirt design says, and that's your continuous lap finished. The next part is to put in your pleats. So you're going to have the open side of the pleat facing towards the placket and the closed side heading towards the remaining part of the shirt, and slip stitch or tack or machine based along the end. So you're going to bring the lines up so you'll have a solid line and a broken line, and you take the one to the other and pin, and the same again, one to the other, line up the raw edge and pin. Just make sure you've got them straight. Sometimes you can make a bit of a angled pleat, but you want it to be absolutely straight. And now I can sew across the end of there. Once you've prepared all of the sleeve edging, then you can sew up the side seams of the shirt, and there are notches as well. You need to keep your seam allowance correct because that will help you to fit the cuff at the bottom, and I can show you that next. Next, we've got the cuff pieces. So you'll have a cuff with a notch taken out of it and some markings. I've used tailor's tacks, and the other piece is interfaced, has the same markings on, and we're going to put those together and add them to the sleeve. First, press under, wrong side to wrong side, the notched edge of the cuff. So there's the notch, down by 1.5 centimeters, but you'll be following your own pattern. I'm just showing you the sort of basic procedure of it. And then I'm going to trim that off to 6 mil. Once you've pressed down the notched edge, you can then put your cuffs right sides together and pin, align the edges. Now, it's a little bit like when you make a collar. The more accurate you sew now, the better it will fit into your sleeve. So I need a 1.5 seam allowance here, so I'm actually going to draw it on so that I can be sure that I turn the corners correctly and that I definitely get the same distance along the bottom as I am along the top. So I know my pivot point is there in the corner, and that will help me make sure that both my cuffs are the same. So we're going to sew the two sides together, and we're going to leave you can sew over the top of the flap, but I actually found it easier just to stop inside, because then that was able to manipulate a little bit more easily when I was trying to fit it to the sleeve. Once it's sewn down, you're sort of a bit stuck with where it's lying, whereas if it's a bit free moving, you can tuck the end in a little bit easier. Okay, time to sew. I'm going to clip the corners and turn it out. Take off the corners and layer out the interfaced seam to reduce the bulk on the seam edges all the way around. can turn your cuff the right way out. Use the point turner on my seam gauge. Absolutely love this tool. So you can get really smart corners on your cuffs. And it's time to press the cuff. When you've pressed the cuff, you should have a 1.5 amount of cuff left over, and that's where you're going to use this. That's your sew line just under there. So we're going to put them right sides together with the cuff. So you line up the markings. I've got tailor's tacks. Sorry, that is the wrong way around. Right sides together with the shirt, and just make sure that all of the bits and pieces underneath are lying flat, so the side seams lying flat of the shirt, of the sleeve, and all of those pleats are lying flat, and you're matching up the notches as you go round. You should get back round to the other side of the placket. Any easing in you can do with pins should fit quite accurately though, if you've used all the right seam allowances. And now you're going to sew, just hold this back a little bit, and you're just going to sew with a 1.5 seam allowance all the way around, and then your folded edge will enclose all the raw edges. Okay, once you've sewn along, you can then turn the cuff and enclose all of those raw edges. Ready to top stitch around your cuff, and that will hold down that folded edge and conceal all of these seam allowances. And that's it, you've made a shirt cuff. You can use these cuff and placket techniques for New Look 6449, which is a belted shirt dress, one with a grandad collar, one with a plain collar. I've actually hacked a shirt out of that pattern as well because I really like the fit of it. You could try the Archer button up by Grey Line Studio. That's really accomplished. That's got a sort of panel in the back, and that's got a burrito yoke and cuffs. And if you're looking for a men's pattern, McCall's 6044 is a real keeper, a lovely pattern with a few different features, but has cuffs, fold back cuffs, and pockets, or pockets with pocket flaps.